I did not expect so many students, and I'm glad that there are so many students who are interested in photography. One of the most interesting things about photography is that it is a very personal sort of a pursuit. You know, it's something which you do as a sort of a meditation almost. It's something that it's like music, or it's like, you know, listening to music or playing music. It's painting. It's like painting. It's like any other kind of art. You know, it's a meditative sort of pursuit. You know, you got to go within yourself. You got to find out those spaces within you, and then you got to project it out. You know, that's what good photography is about. And photography is changing quite a bit. I mean, it's changing like you know, ever since digital photography has come in such a big way. It's changing radically. You know, every year I see something that is extremely interesting in terms of the kind of appeal that picture making now has, the kind of ideas that are being brought out, the kind of personal vision that is being brought out, the kind of social scenarios that are being depicted nowadays. And it's all changing. It's all becoming new, modern, radically different from what it was yesterday. Somehow what I don't like about today's photography is that, you know, people are snap shooting too much. You know, there's a lot of waste. Just as you have waste in, you know, so many other kinds of things, you have waste in photography too. You know, snap shooting. Snap shooting is nice, it's good. You know, there's nothing wrong with snap. You go out with friends and you take a couple of pictures, you know, but what is happening with photographers, with serious photographers, with people who really want to practice photography is that, you know, a digital camera allows you the chance to just shoot and shoot and shoot, unlimited. You don't remember what you shot. You know, you go back home and you don't remember what, you know, exactly what kind of frames you've shot. You remember it when you see it again, when you see it on the screen, and then you say, oh, okay, you know, that's a good picture. It doesn't work that way. You know, a good photographer needs to know that the picture is good even before the shutter is released. You know, that is the hallmark of a good photographer. You know, you need to imagine, pre-visualize, decide what you really want before you release the shutter. One of the good things about digital photography is that there's so many good things about digital photography. You get instant feedback. I mean, that's the most important thing. You know, the minute you click the shutter, you know what you've got. You can see the frame, you can see your composition, you can see everything. Okay, that also happens to be the biggest drawback of digital photography. Why? Because now you're suddenly studying the frame after you've shot it. You're not really looking at the frame before you shot it. Alright? You want to grab the moment, you've got to grab the instant. Okay, remember that back in the old days, when we used to work with analog cameras, okay, you had 35 frames of film in a single roll. You were constrained with that. Okay, and that constraint basically meant that, you know, you really can't just keep shooting whatever, you know, just snap shoot all over the place. It meant that every time you release a shutter, it's going to cost you a little bit more. Okay, because you got to, you know, not just buy that film, but you got to, you know, then develop it and then make prints out of it if you really want to see what that picture is all about. Alright, and then there's that period of anticipation. For professional photographers, it was very difficult. You know, you make a set, and then, you know, you have the models and you have the makeup, and then you have spent all that money, and then you shoot with film. You don't know what's going to happen. You know, so they shoot 3 rolls of film. These 3 rolls are given to different laboratories. Alright, just to ensure, and then they have 3 cameras for that. Okay, just to ensure that if the laboratory screws up, alright, okay, you have a backup, and then you have secondary backup. You have a backup for a backup. Alright, it was tough. And then you have that 1.5 days of waiting, because good labs would take their time. You know, they take their time to process. It's not instant. Alright, and then if something goes wrong, can you actually call the models again? Can you make the set again? Can you do the makeup again? You can't. So everything had to be perfect right from the very beginning. The frame had to be perfect. Everything has to be visualized perfectly. Okay, there is no second chance. Okay, and that holds true today as well. There is no second chance when you shoot. When you release the shutter, that moment is gone. It will never come back. The beauty of photography, just as much as we are all very different from each other and we are all very unique from each other, okay, you can never ever get two pictures which are exactly the same. Okay, even if you shoot it, exactly one after the other, it will never be the same. Okay, you have two people standing side by side, you point the camera in exactly the same, in that direction, in the same direction, exactly the same composition, mounted on a tripod, you look to the thing, you still can't get the same picture. Something would have changed. The space would have changed. There would be a bird in the frame. The grass would have moved. There would be something different about that frame. Alright? Do you know how many pictures there are floating on the internet today? Can you take a guess? On the internet, on Facebook, how many pictures are there on Facebook today? Sorry? Millions? Billions? How many billions? Zillions. Okay, zillion is a number. Okay, there are 40 billion pictures on Facebook. 40 billion. Okay, you're talking about something like 5 times the population of the planet, 6 times the population of the planet. Okay, that's the number of pictures that are there on Facebook. How many have we seen? 0.0000 something percent. Alright? And what's a picture if it's not seen? Is there something like a picture if it's not being seen? Yes, there is. I mean, you shoot for yourself if you want. You can shoot for yourself if you want. Don't display to anyone. That's your personal picture. It's something that's just meant for you. It's your memory. It's your something very, very close to you. It's something that you can share with just one person. It's something that you can share with, a very close circle of people. There are pictures that, not everybody has to like your picture. You can understand your picture, nobody else can understand your picture, so be it. Nobody tells you what a good picture is. Okay, only you tell yourself that this is a good picture or a bad picture. I think that's the other essential thing about photography, because today everybody is a judge. You put something up on Facebook, everybody likes it. You get 400 likes and you have 25,000 friends on Facebook, and 2,000 people will say, okay, I like this picture. So what does that like mean? I mean, is there any sort of, a real critique that's coming out of them? No. So Facebook is the wrong platform if you want to get people to like or dislike your pictures. Alright? People might appreciate it. Everyone appreciates picture. Picture speaks 1,000 words. It can talk more than any other form of visual art even. Okay? A single frame, that single moment, that single thing can talk more than any other kind of visual art. Alright, you have films and movies and everything. Yes, it keeps you engaged for those 2 hours. It gives you a message. It can be very powerful. Okay, but it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, a film is made up of millions of frames. Okay, and yet one photograph can speak. One photograph can have meaning. Okay, it could be a personal meaning. How many of you want to be professional photographers? Yeah. A lot of you, professional, commercial photographers, want to do something commercial with photography. Okay, what you got to realize is that it begins with yourself. Okay, tomorrow you may not be a successful professional photographer at all. Because you may not be great at promoting yourself. You may feel, hey, look, it's really ugly. It's an ugly thing to promote yourself in that manner. Right? It's not a very nice thing to do, to say that, look, I'm good. You've got to build that confidence to be able to do that. You may not be able to get there. Your work may not be mass audience sort of appeal sort of work. But at the end of the day, what are we talking about? Photography, like music, like any other form of art, is such a personal pursuit. Okay, that you can shoot just for a single audience. That's for yourself. Okay, and it has got to begin there. You have to be your own worst critic. When you look at a picture and when you compare all the pictures that you have and you are trying to make a selection, you're trying to work on a series or a body of work, a portfolio maybe, to show somebody else, you have to be ruthless. You have to kill yourself. You got to say that none of these are really good. And if something is really good, it's got to be for a reason, a very strong reason, a very personal reason. Just remember, if a photograph can, if something that you shoot can connect with yourself, okay, there's a big likelihood that it can connect with a lot more people outside of you. If it cannot connect with yourself, you may take a lot of effort. See, now the thing is, you've got to cut away the effort when you make your own selection. When you take a picture and when you view it yourself, you've got to cut away that person who shot it. Okay, then you've got to step outside your own shoes. You've got to become a different person. Why? Because all that effort of shooting, okay, will simply spoil your judgment. You'll just simply say, I was there and I was waiting in the rain and I was shooting this and I went for a walk on the beach and I took that picture. I've had a lot of students justifying the fact that they made a mistake. Okay, and I love that because you make a mistake again and again and again. You make the same kind of mistake and it becomes style. I've seen a lot of students create their own style by making their own mistake again and again and again. And is that wrong? It's not wrong. It's okay. Alright? But then what kind of a mistake is it that you have made? Have you propped away the hands? Have you, so there are certain rules and there are certain rules. The rules are meant to be broken. Every photographer will tell you that rules are meant to be broken. Okay? But you've got to learn the rules and understand why you are breaking it in the first place. That is the most important thing about photography is learn the rules. Okay, we see modern versions of photography. I was just one of my latest editorial notes that I wrote in the magazine was about the speech that was made by Sting in 1994 in the College of Berkeley. It's a music college, and he was asked to give a commencement address, right, to students. And he said that, look, I have won so many Grammy. I'm supposed to be an authority on music, but if you ask me from where that music comes from, how I create it, I don't know. There is no answer to that. And all we do is we seek inspiration. We seek, and that's 99% of the time, we seek inspiration. It's always a search for something. There's a search. It's an ongoing kind of search, and it's an internal search, right? And is there a formula for that search? No, there's nothing. Okay, and surprisingly, this nothing is the most important aspect of any kind of art, whether it is music, or whether it's poetry, or whether it's reciting poetry, or whether it is painting. It is this nothing that eventually becomes most important. Now, what do I mean by nothing? He says that he wonders whether as a musician, the most important thing that he does is create a framework for silence. The most important thing that a photographer does is create a frame for space. And that space, unfortunately, is the most misunderstood. It is the most misjudged. It is the most, unfortunately, it is the most difficult thing to manage. Why? Because when you have something like nothing, okay, when you have something that is empty, when you have a space in which, it's just a space, okay, when it's complete silence, okay, you're listening to yourself. That's when you're looking inwards. That's when you're seeing things, okay, which might not even be there. Okay, that's when you're visualizing. That's when you're creating. That's when you're, okay, looking at ways to frame that. Okay, so that nothing or that emptiness or that silence or that, that void, okay, is what you are building a frame around. And composition is all about that. Whether it is music, you're building a frame into music. You're building a frame around that silence. When it's photography, you're building a frame around that space. If you're reciting that poetry, you have your pauses. Okay, and suddenly the pauses become most important thing. Okay, when you're reciting poetry. Okay, when you're listening to a ghazal, you're looking for that pause or that little bit of silence in between. All right, so that becomes the most critical part of any kind of photography, is that silence. Okay, and all rules of composition, whether you're talking about the rule of thirds, you know about the rule of thirds? Yeah, some of you know about the rule of thirds, right? Whether it is the rule of thirds or whether it is, a diagonal line cutting the frame, or whether you're talking about negative space, it is still something that is created around that space. We all talk about, as students of photography, students are often told, okay, here is something, here is a subject, okay, how are you going to shoot that subject? What are you going to do with that subject? Okay, or when we are shooting, we are searching for a subject. We are all searching for that one subject that, is interesting for us. All right, but I would so much like to tell a student, here is a space. Okay, now what are you going to do with it? Okay, what are you going to do with that space? How are you going to frame that space? What are you going to create in that space? That's your canvas. That's your emptiness. Okay, that's where you pour your mind out. That's where you bring everything out. Today's photography is all about that. That's what makes it a little different from yesterday's photography. Yesterday's photography was about, how do you portray a subject really well. But why was it about portraying a subject really well? Because there was so much of a learning curve involved in photography back then. Even making a correct exposure had learning to it. Okay, today your cameras have an automatic mode. You just put the camera on automatic and you shoot, you get a correct exposure. Alright, more than anything else today, okay, it is about bringing that inner self out there. It doesn't matter if you know photography, if you don't know photography, all that does not matter today. What makes the biggest difference, okay, is are you putting yourself out there? Okay, that is what makes the difference between a good photographer and a bad photographer today. Are you putting yourself out there? In the years gone by, the camera was a very complex mechanism. It was difficult to operate. You would never get that 8 frames per second and 5 frames per second and those kind of shooting speeds. You could never shoot 1,000 frames. And at the end of it, we still remember those photographers, okay, who shot with their manual camera, and those pictures today are still the most famous pictures, even today. So what was it about the photography of that as compared to the photography of today? Why don't we have iconic pictures coming out from today? Do you remember any pictures from the last 5 years? But you still remember the Vietnam, the Vietnam girl. You remember the National Geographic cover, right? Remember those pictures? They were all shot in film, right? So today's iconic pictures must come from within. It can't come from, there was a difference between those days and now. However, there's some things that we can pick from those days. Do you need to know photography? I would say no, you don't need to know photography. You don't need to know anything. What's the most important thing for a photographer? You're talking about you got to pour yourself out, you got to bring yourself out, you got to look within you, gain your inspirations from whatever's inside you, right? But what is the most important thing for a photographer today? You are very passionate about photography maybe. You studied it for years. But that photographer, can he make a great picture? No. But you find a child, who loves his mother, okay, and that child will make a beautiful portrait of his mother without knowing photography at all. Why? Why? Because he loves his mother. The thing is, you got to have a joy for something that, while you're looking inwards, okay, that inward, there you'll find a joy for a certain kind of subject. You'll find a muse. You'll find, it could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It could be some fascination that you have for some kind of a rock or some kind of a tree or some kind of place. It could be a beach or it could be anything. could be the road, it could be a puddle of water, it can be a gate, it can be some little bit of rust somewhere, that you found interesting. But the thing is, if you have a joy for what you're seeing, if you have a joy for that subject, you automatically will start producing brilliant pictures which nobody else has seen. Why? Okay, because that's your joy, that's your inner feeling that's coming to life. And nobody else has seen the same thing in the same way. No one else can see, your family, okay, or your girlfriend or boyfriend in the same way. Alright, so there's something there. Okay, there's something there. The more you explore it, the more you decide to get into it, the more you shoot with just that. Forget about knowing the camera really well. Keep the camera on automatic and just concentrate on just only that, and you're bound to get a body work that will amaze people. Where people look at it and say, there's something different about this. There's something new about this. I can almost feel what that person was feeling when he shot that picture. I can imagine being in that space. So that's the thing about today's photography. That's where the big difference comes in. Okay, is it important to know technique? Is it important to know a camera like the back of your hand? Yes, it's very important, of course. You really want to study photography. You want to really understand where you can apply technique. You need to know what the technique is in the first place. But what is your objective? Everything depends on what your objective is. The science depends on the objective. The science depends on the art. If you have something in your mind which you want to create, figure out a way around it. Do you want to make a huge print? Do you want to make a giant print but you have only a cell phone camera? What can you do with it? You need to figure out a way. Can you make it a collage of tiny pictures of all kinds of textures and rust and wood and all kinds of the gate outside your house, or just birds flying in the air? Can you make a giant collage out of it with a cell phone camera? You can, and make a huge print out of it. But the point really is, okay, you got to figure out your way around it. Okay, and the technique, the science is dependent on that. Science is dependent on what you need to achieve at the very end of it. Alright, I think that's another very important thing about photography, especially today. Okay, I began the other way around. I gave science all that importance. I wanted to know everything about the chemistry and the physics and how a lens was made and what happens to light when it passes through the lens. And and a lot of people play on that. You have companies like Carl Zeiss and all those manufacturers who produce the finest optics, with the highest resolution, so that when you have a camera with a 36 million pixel sensor, you need a lens that can resolve the image onto that sensor. It needs to be perfect. It can't have aberrations. You can't have purple fringing. You can't have so many kind of distortion. So many things that go into the creation of a lens, and then that lens costs 3 lakhs, right? And then you decide to buy that lens, put in the camera, perfect pictures, very sharp. And then somebody else walks away with the price of a very grainy picture. Okay, so it all depends on what you are thinking at the time of shooting, what you're feeling at the time of shooting, whether you remember the frame, whether you're thinking in the right way, and is there a right way and a wrong way? I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. Okay, today's photography, I really don't know. But I do know one thing: if you don't have an interest in the subject that you're shooting, if you don't have an interest in the space that you're shooting, if you're not interested in framing emptiness correctly, if you're not interested in the emptiness that is inside you, okay, sure as hell you're not going to be a good photographer. Regardless of the kind of photography that you're doing, even if it's commercial photography, even if it's something which is, commercial photography has a different side to the whole thing, but it needs to begin like this. It needs to begin with knowing where you need to go. Okay, as a commercial photographer, I have unfortunately done all kinds of funny assignments, including when I first began, I was commissioned to shoot um, you know, portfolio pictures for a very rich family for the daughter, so that she could be, thrown into the market, and they could, find a groom for her. And they had this golden horse, huge golden horse, full-sized horse, made of, I don't know, brass, in the middle of the room, and they wanted her to sit on the horse, and they wanted a picture shot of that. And she was this plump, very nicely disposed girl, but plump, and so I put on the horse, and I set up my lights and all that, and they were paying me really well. And I took a picture, and they loved it. Why? Because unknowing to me, because I was not thinking of it. The horse was a nice brass horse, so when all the flashes hit the horse, it all started shining. Okay, I hated that picture. I have never ever shown it to anybody else in my life. Okay, so commercial photography can be very strange and very weird. And do I want to ever do it again? Well, no. I know, no matter how much of money I get, no matter, you can pay me $1 million, but I will not shoot that kind of picture ever again in my life. I promised myself that on that day. But at that point I was 21, and I just started, and money was good. So if you don't like what you're shooting, okay, how are you going to get results? How are you going to really get the kind of quality that you really want in your pictures, right? I think that's very important. I think that's the basics of it. I've got a couple of pictures that I want to show you, because I'm trying to make a point with what I'm saying. Can we, I don't know who's, can we turn this light off? Yeah. Or just turn all the lights off, actually. That's the most important light. Yeah. Okay, since this is a non-commercial sort of a talk, and since this is, and we are all students, I am also a student. Since we are all here together, I have taken the liberty of showing you somebody else's work, and it's a very famous photographer's work. Usually you need to seek permission from someone to show this sort of work. I have not done it, but I'm still showing you. You all remember this picture? Who shot it? Who shot it? Oh, one person knows. Two people know. See, the thing about, you don't remember the name of the photographer who shot it, you remember the image that he shot. You can see some of the most iconic pictures, it remains in the back of your mind, but you don't know who shot it. I think that is it's the biggest kind of testament to a photographer's prowess, is people remember his pictures, okay, so much that they really don't know the name of the photographer. You can become infamous by doing stunts, by doing all kinds of stupid things to attract media attention, and then people know your name. Okay, and as much as I can't help thinking of certain photographers from Mumbai who are page 3 and who come in front of media every second day, and you can see them in advertisements and all of that, and but do you remember even a single picture that the person shot? Maybe not. This is your claim to fame. As a photographer, everyone tries to do this. Eventually, at the end of a photographer's life, at the end of my life, what really will differentiate me from somebody else is the pictures that I've shot, and my whole life will amount to just maybe a minute. If you actually count the amount of time the shutter was open and closed, it'll just be that 1 minute, or even less than that, 30 seconds, okay, of pictures, of actual exposure time. Okay, my whole life is geared towards that 30 seconds. You know, so that is what differentiates one photographer from the other. Okay, today you can attend a Steve McCurry workshop for about 10 lakhs. You can pay 10 lakhs and you can attend a 7-day workshop with Steve McCurry. But what does he do in that workshop? If you actually go and see what he does in the workshop, he just randomly talks. You know, he takes you around a place. Okay, people pay 10 lakhs just to be with the guy, just to see him for real, just to shake hands with him, and just to hear his commentary about your work, about your picture making, and people are willing to pay for that. Yeah, can we go ahead? Okay, let's go back. What's the interesting thing about this picture? Eyes. Her gaze. What else? Sorry? Emotion, expression, clothes. Somebody mentioned clothes, somebody mentioned colors. Clothes, colors, that's really good. You know, the thing is that the picture has so many layers, this photograph has so many layers to it. That's what makes it interesting. First you see the eyes, then it's only a little later on that you actually start looking around. You start looking at maybe the hair is not so, well kept. Maybe the shawl has got holes in it. Maybe this person is not a very well-to-do person. But you're captivated by those eyes. Okay? So, layering your information in pictures again becomes a very, very important thing. But does a photographer really think about all of these things when he chooses to shoot the frame? Maybe not, but it becomes an instinct. Okay? Once you practice anything consistently enough, once you do that riyaz, you have your Saregamapadanisa and you just keep on at it, and then you have one raga which you keep on at it. At some point, you'll realize how you can combine it, and then at some other point, maybe after 4 or 5 years of continuously, practicing it, you can just go on for hours, and it'll be, every time you sing, it'll be a fresh creation, it'll be something different, but it will be within a framework. It's instinct. It just comes out like that. It just becomes like that. So that the art of practice of photography is vital. It's just like music or any other kind of art. You've got to practice and practice and practice until it becomes a part of you, becomes your system. Yeah. Again, another one of Steve McCurry's pictures. Notice the use of space. I was talking about space. One of the most misjudged. Yeah, please. Keep going, I'll tell you when to stop. A mosque in Kashmir. Oslo. Anyone remembers this from old textbooks? Sorry? Winston Churchill. You remember the photograph? Have you seen this photograph before? Where? Textbooks. The poor guy, I'm sure he didn't get all that. These photographs are some of the most reproduced pictures in the world because it's gone in textbooks. There are millions of textbooks all over the world. Okay, and I'm sure he didn't get the money for it. I'm sure no government, has decided to pay him for these, publishing that particular picture. Claim to fame. What is the difference in the style of portraiture? This is by another photographer. His name is Yusuf Karsh. The name of the photographer is Yusuf Karsh. Okay, a different style of photographer. Steve McCurry is a contemporary photographer. He's today's photographer. He still shoots. Despite being famous, he has to go out and shoot all the time. This is Karsh. He passed away some time ago, and this is what he shot. What do you think? What makes this picture interesting?
Maybe also the personality of the person involved. If it was Winston Churchill, he was hard to get, like for photographers. So maybe
Yusuf Kash is to say that, you know, I don't photograph people, I photograph the greatness within people. The greatness within people. I don't photograph people. I like to see the greatness within people. I like to portray that. You know, that is what he himself has said about his own work. Okay, this particular photograph has a very interesting story behind it. This is Winston Churchill during the time of the Second World War, when Britain was right in the middle of it. Alright, and Winston Churchill, as you know, was not a man that you could, you know, really annoy. You know, he can come at you, he's a typical British bulldog. You know, can get very violent, can get very angry. Okay, and he had no time. I mean, a Prime Minister of England in the middle of war is not someone you can really afford. So when Yusuf Kash says that, look, I need 5 minutes of your time, he says that, fine, I'll give you exactly 5 minutes and not a second more. Okay, so he walks out of the parliament, you know, that session or whatever he was in, walks out, okay, and he says, okay, so where do you want to shoot this? He had already done the setup and kept it. He positioned his lights and he knew exactly what he wanted. And Winston Churchill comes, he's reading papers, he's smoking a cigar. Alright, he's smoking a cigar. Okay, and smoke is the worst thing for a portrait, because, you know, the flash will bounce off the smoke, it'll look ugly, and all of that. And he refuses to remove the cigar from his mouth. Okay, and there's no time. There's no time. So what does Kash do? He goes to him and he says, excuse me, sir, and he pulls the cigar from his mouth. Okay, he pulls the cigar out of the Prime Minister of England's mouth, especially the Prime Minister who was at war with Germany. Okay, and that's what he gets. You know, he was so up, you know, he did not know what to think. I mean, no one had ever done something like this to him before. You know, and later, okay, a lot later, when he saw the picture, finally, he told Yusuf Kash that you can make a roaring lion stand still for your camera. Okay, and at that point of time, by Yusuf Kash's own admission, Yusuf Kash was actually petrified. He was scared. He thought he was going to be thrown into jail for this. Another picture, I mean, in my school, I've got this portrait hanging on the hall of my school where I studied. You know, so I've always seen this. I never knew you shot it. Then later on, when I actually decided to study photography, I realized. Do you see the difference in the kind of portraiture? Even the previous set by Steve McCurry was portraits of people. You know, this is again a very different style of portraiture, very classical sort of an approach to portraiture, right? Yeah. Who's this? Anyone can guess? Pablo Picasso. A very interesting thing about this picture was when the picture was being framed, when Yusuf Kash was taking the shot, Pablo Picasso saw his own reflection in his lens, in the lens. And he shifted his angle towards that pot. That pot is painted by him. Alright, so he shifted his body towards the pot because he could see that made a better frame. So you see how subjects also sometimes help with the photography. If he was sitting perfectly straight, would it have been such a good picture? No. Posture, you know, all that makes a difference. In graduate studies, pre-graduate studies, 4-year course in photography, American schools, they first teach you how to draw a line. It is the most difficult thing to draw a line. Okay, again, what you're doing with the line, you are giving reference to the space for that line. Okay, it is the most difficult thing to draw a line. You know, I can tell you right now, draw a line, you know, and draw a beautiful line, draw a nice line, draw a pretty line. Okay, and you'll come up with boxes and circles and squiggles and all kinds of things, but you will not come up with a pretty line. It's very difficult to be simple. Okay, and simplicity is, I think, essential for photography. Okay, throw away what is not required. You know, that's essential for photography. Okay, you can buy the most, we'll come to that a little later. Yeah. Again, one more style, different style of portraiture. All these are portraits, isn't it? So far, everything that we've seen, the Taj Mahal shot, or even if that mosque in Kashmir by Steve McCurry, right? All that was also portraiture. It was a portrait of a different style, different kind of portraiture, different kind of portraiture. Sorry. Do you need to really show a face for a portrait? Not really. You know, but what do you need to show in a portrait?
Basically, need to bring out the character of the subject.
The essence, right? The essence is important, and unless you have a passion for the subject, you will not get the essence. Yeah. This is by the previous photograph, and this photograph too is by a photographer by the name of Herb Ritz. Again, he passed away very young recently. He was a celebrity photographer. Okay, his call to fame is not really that he shot celebrities. His call to fame is the way he portrayed them. You know, the way he made celebrities comfortable despite their very obvious, physical characteristics or handicaps. Who's this? Man, you guys are uneducated. You are BMM students, right? Terrible.
I don't know his name, but he played Superman and...
Yeah, Superman, right. Another example where the work precedes the man, right? Yeah, this is the original Superman, right? Christopher Reeve. His name is Christopher Reeve. He had a horse riding accident and he broke his neck, and he was paralyzed since then. He passed away. He also passed away recently. Yeah. Now, who is this? This is Elizabeth Taylor after her brain surgery, after she had her tumor removed from her brain. Okay, now most beautiful women would never allow a photographer to shoot them like this. You can actually see the scar. You can see the place where they cut her head open. Alright? But still, despite the scar, the photographer has made her look beautiful. Look at the profile. It's almost perfect, right? Yeah. Yet another kind of portraiture. Yet a different style of shooting. Completely different kind of portraiture. This is by a photographer who he's one of my favorite photographers. His name is Sebastião Salgado. Sebastião Salgado. Lives in France now. Has traveled all over the world. Comes to India very frequently. Steve McCurry also is another photographer who comes to India very frequently. Steve McCurry, in fact, he says the three most favorite places in the world for him are India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And he travels these three countries for most of the time. 3/4 of the year, he's in either of these three countries. Right? This is Sebastião Salgado, and he has many books. There was a lot of critique against Sebastião because because they thought his pictures were dark. Can you go to the next one? Yeah, they thought his pictures were of suffering, and it's not something that we all want to see. One of the biggest problems with Indian media and foreign media both is that we love, the pictures that sell the most are pictures of poverty and suffering and all of that, and that goes into our own newspapers, and they are the ones that are sold most abroad, unfortunately, and they get a different perspective on what India is. And I think it's unethical to actually look at India from that perspective. Look, everyone has got a joy, right? Even the person has got a joy. You want to portray that joy, that's a different thing. You want to portray that sorrow, that's, again, how are you doing it? Is it sensitive enough? Are you portraying it, what are you trying to say? You shoot a kid, with no legs and with no arms. What are you trying to really say? Are you shooting that kid for showing how joyous that even a child's emotions can be? Or are you shooting the kid to show off, how ugly he is? A lot of people shoot because of the ugliness, and I think that is the wrong thing to do. That can't be a subject. Yeah. Mine workers in Brazil. yet another kind of portraiture. Eventually, I think everything is portraiture. I mean, we all try and portray something in our pictures, right? So we see 4 different photographers with 4 very, very different styles of portraying something, okay? And what is the one thing that you can say about any of these pictures? The one thing is that it is not random. You know, these pictures have been thought through. There's a reason for taking these pictures, okay? And you have to discover that reason for yourself. I think that reason is important. You have to discover that reason. Why are you shooting? You know, for yourself. What are you shooting? Why are you shooting? That you must discover for yourself. If you are not getting a reason, don't shoot. You know, you carry a camera everywhere. You know, that's one of the things that you learn in photography. Carry a camera everywhere. You know, you're supposed to see a frame everywhere. Okay, as a photographer, as a practicing student of photography, practicing photography, you have to see the frame everywhere. But if you don't see a meaningful frame, you've got to keep searching for that meaning. You've got to keep searching. You've got to continuously ask, okay, why am I taking this picture? Is it for myself? You know, am I trying to portray something? Am I trying to, do something? You know, just now I've been in a judging session for a photography contest right here. Okay, I saw a lot of staged pictures, you know, pictures where somebody was asked to smoke or somebody was asked to do something, and when kid was, whatever, you know, staged pictures, you know. But then, okay, why are you really staging that shot? You know, is it wrong? I would not say staging is not wrong. Staging is okay. Okay, as long as there's a reason for you to stage, as long as there's something that you are trying to get from the shot. You know, so for whatever you do, however you do it, okay, figure out a reason. There is a method to the madness. There is a reason for doing everything. Okay, you need to figure out your reasons. You know, that's the most vital, important thing about any kind of photography today. Okay, so when you go forward, be sensitive. Think your frames through. Remember that it's about the emptiness, that it is about the space, it's about the silence. It's about something that is from within you that's coming outside. It's about the constraints. Yes, okay, that's one last thing I would like to talk about is about constraints in photography. Do you happen to know about a photographer by the name of Henri Cartier-Bresson? Have you heard of a photographer by the name of Henri Cartier-Bresson? Right? Do you remember the film Gandhi? Right? There's one of the scenes in the movie is where he's emerging from a train, and there's a huge mass of people on the platform. The other thing are people sitting on trees during the Gandhi March. You remember those scenes in the movie? They have been recreated from Henri Cartier-Bresson's photographs. Okay, he's considered to be one of the most iconic, legendary people photographers of our time. Okay, that ever was. He had this concept of he used to do a very interesting thing. He shot with a Leica. Now you're going to say that, my God, he had a Leica. That's why he's a good photographer. Unfortunately, that's not the reason. I don't think it really bothered or it mattered to him. He just had the Leica because of a small, tiny, little camera which nobody really bothered about. That's why he had the Leica. Okay. Now the Leica, as you know, is a film camera, which means he was restricted to 35 exposures. Okay, which means that he could not carry. He was a walking photographer in the sense that he would walk for 6 hours every day. For most of his life, he has walked for 6 hours a day, just looking for that shot. Trying. Most of it was in the streets of Paris. Most of his photography was on the streets of Paris. He shot all over the world, but even if he did not have an assignment, he would go out, take a bus, any bus, first bus that he saw, get on it, get off in some place that he had no recollection. And he'd say that, okay, he would time himself and say, in half an hour I'll get off the bus, wherever it is. From there he would start walking and walking and walking and walking and walking. Okay, so now he did not know which place he was in. He was not familiar with the territory. Okay, he did not know what he was going to get. He had 35 frames of film. Okay, exactly 35 frames. Okay, sometimes he would walk and he would not even get a single picture. Okay, sometimes on some days he would shoot 3 frames, on some days he would shoot 10 frames, on some days he would shoot a couple of rolls of film. Okay, that again is not more than 100 frames. All right, and then he told himself, look, I don't want to carry lenses. I don't want the burden of having to, change my lenses. So he then stuck with his regular 35mm lens. That was his favorite lens. Okay, no zoom. He can't move. If he had to get closer to a subject, he had to walk there. Okay, if he wanted something else in the frame, he had to shift his position. He had to go backwards. Okay, so now he was even constrained with the kind of lens that he had. And then one day he said that, look, I don't even want to be bothered by what I'm seeing in the viewfinder. Okay, I don't want to be bothered with what I'm seeing in the viewfinder. I am distracted by what is there in the viewfinder. So he takes a bit of black tape, something like insulation tape, and he puts it over the viewfinder. So now he can't see through the camera. He's got one lens. Okay, he's got 35 exposures. All right, and he was walking down the streets of Paris one day, and he found a hole in the wall. He puts his camera through the hole. He was not even seeing what was on the other side, and he takes a picture. He looks at the hole, finds a nice street with houses on both sides, And when he develops the picture, he finds a couple of boys jumping over a puddle. It then became one of his most iconic pictures. And then somebody asked him, what is this? Is this luck? I mean, you do not even look through the thing. By your own admittance, you do not even see the picture. And he says, yes, it's luck. But, I think that, he made his luck. He really made his luck. He constrained himself to the point where things never really bothered. He kept his focus. His focus was also locked. He never had to really bother about anything except the moment. Except the moment. Everything was locked. The focus was locked. Okay, he kept his lens on something called as a hyperfocal distance, which ensures the maximum amount of depth of field. Okay, he would change shutter speed and aperture slightly here and there. And that's it. All right. His lens, no zoom, fixed focal length, 25mm, only 35 frames of film. He didn't even want to be bothered by what he saw in the viewfinder. He practiced so much that he knew what the camera was seeing regardless of where he held. He can hold the camera here and shoot, and he knows what the frame will be. Constrained himself to a point where the only thing that mattered, okay, was the moment. Okay, and he called this whole moment, he called it the decisive moment. Okay, he had a phrase for it. And he says the decisive moment is something that happens not when you release the shutter. It happens the instant before releasing the shutter. That is the decisive moment. When you have decided that this is your frame and this is your composition and now you're going to shoot. That is the decisive moment. Alright? So I think at the end of it, okay, photography is also about the constraints. Okay, so when we have too many choices, we decide not to choose. When we have program mode and shutter priority, and we have a sunset mode, and we have a dog mode, and we have a bacha mode, and we have an animal mode, and we have underwater mode and overwater mode and beach mode and all that. And then what do? Auto, isn't it? Full automatic. When we have too many choices, we decide not to choose. If you think your lens that you have right now is not good enough, no lens will be good enough. You'll end up spending, I've seen people spend, lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of rupees on lenses and new cameras. And I had guys coming to me and saying that, I've got this is a Canon 7D, US 7D. I don't think it's really good enough. What do you think about the Mark IV? Should I buy the Mark IV? Or should I buy the 5D Mark III? Now it's a new camera. And I keep wondering, man, this guy has a lot of money. I wish he would give some of that to me, and maybe I can take a commission from this guy. you know. And, and what does he want to shoot? He wants to open up booths, passport photo booths. But an interesting concept, I give him that. A very interesting concept. He wants to open, okay, staying there for the night. Okay, and there are wild animals, leopards, and all kind of wild animals that walk around. He's come with a huge, a 400mm lens. All right, he's had the lens for 2 years. He's never used it. He has no time. He always wanted to, so he decided to spend 10 grand and come to our workshop and spend a little time, which is nice, which is good. And did he get a single shot? He managed to get a single shot. He was trying to shoot for birds and suddenly he realized the lens was damn heavy. He lifts the thing up and goes down. He lifts it up again and goes down again. It's damn heavy. Okay, suddenly he realized, shit, I wish I bought my 70-300mm, tiny, small, regular zoom lens along with me. And then after that he even asked whether someone should, if one of us would be interested in buying that lens off from him. An unused, brand new, mint condition 400mm lens which costs about 4 lakhs. We're willing to sell it off. Chalo. Okay, so regardless of whether you have a cell phone, you have a camera, it's a constraint, use that constraint. A constraint is good for the soul. Whenever we have too much of anything, we make stupid decisions. We make stupid choices. When we have too many resources, we make a stupid choice. Alright? When we have too much of money, we spend it in all the funny things. Alright? So it's better not to have any money. Right? So be poor, be happy, shoot good pictures. Thank you.
We open to questions. Anybody wants to ask us something? We can talk to him after, after the session is over, after everything. That's all we can answer questions.
Yeah. Do you have any questions you want to ask?
Anything else?
Anything about publishing, anything about photography, whether you want a career in the subject. Yeah, you always seem to have questions.
How do you, if you want to establish yourself as a freelance photographer, you're a student and you want to do little assignments, maybe to make money, if not anything else. So how do you establish yourself as a freelance photographer? How do you make yourself recognizable?
Okay, that, like I said, commercial photography is a very different ball game from do shooting for yourself or doing photography for yourself. Obviously, you have to understand that there is a requirement from a client, and you got to fulfill that requirement. So you need to first cater to a market. Now, I've seen lots and lots of young photographers, students, who are so keen on fashion photography. Okay, but what is the market for fashion? You look at fashion photography today. You have about 200 designers graduating every year. Okay, and out of that maybe you have those top 10 guys who are really into good fashion design. Okay, and that's about it. And you have one Lakme Fashion Week that's happening. So where is the market? You've got to go where the market is. Yeah? That's the first rule of any kind of business. You've got to figure out whether, yes, you can do street fashion, you can do all kind of that becomes a personal sort of thing. That becomes a personal thing. So the first thing that you need to figure out is, okay, is there a market for the kind of photography that I want to do? And if there isn't, okay, then what is the next best thing that I can do? Okay, that will satisfy me, that will satisfy my customers, where I have a chance of getting in. Second most important thing, and the thing that everybody falters on eventually at the end of the day, is discipline. Okay, you start small. You first have to build your portfolio. You first have to have something to show people. Okay, you got to have your business card. You got to have your letterheads in place. You got to have all that in place before you begin. You got to have a small website in place. It doesn't have to be a big website, but at least something basic to show people. All right, and then every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, you got to tell yourself that every day at 9 o'clock I'm going to call these 30 people. Okay, 30 cold calls. Try and seek an appointment with 30 people. Go for it. Go for that meeting. You should never be satisfied if you're not doing one meeting a day. At least one meeting a day. And then, are you following up with those people? Maybe today they said no. Are you following up with them so that they remember you? Maybe they'll say that, okay, this girl has come to me, 6 times. Maybe I should give her something. It begins that way. It all begins that way. It begins small. It begins with first steps first. You know, you really can't hope to become, you know, the biggest and the best photographer by, you know, by just throwing money. It all begins with the first steps first, step by step by step, and that is where most people falter, because, you know, on day 6 you decide that, hey, you know, I'll just sleep in a little bit. I got drunk yesterday, and you know, I've got this hangover, so I won't wake up at 9. I'll wake up at 11 in the morning, and then the next day you say, fine, today I'll take an off. You know, I'm working at home. Let me play a computer game. Let me watch a movie. And let me call some friends over. That's it. That's the end. Trust me, it's the beginning of the end. Okay, that is what is required to be a commercial photographer. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Hello. So what is the physics behind the underwater photography?
Lots of photography can get quite technical in nature. A lot of scientific photography, a lot of forensic photography, underwater photography, for instance. The basics of underwater photography, unless you can hold your breath for like that long and go underwater, you need to have a diver suit. You need to know how to dive in the first place. So yeah, so there are other skills involved also. Okay, one of the biggest diving underwater photographers, okay, loved diving first. When he went inside, he saw a whole new world out there and was so fascinated by it that he took to photography. Okay, photography was a secondary thing for him. Okay, diving was first. But there's a lot of equipment involved in underwater photography. You know, there are camera housings to make a camera completely waterproof. You know, and then there's also a certain depth to which you can go to with that camera. You know, then you got to get to places where there are certain kinds of pictures available. You know, so all that makes a very, very big difference. Underwater photography is something, it's not out of reach today. It used to be out of reach maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Okay, today, even for an average guy, like, you know, average people like us, it is not out of reach as long as you really, really want to do it. And they pay them. And they get the pictures.
The diver takes the photo and they have a LCD screen.
No, nothing. The diver shoots the pictures.
There's this photographer who clicks by attaching his camera to the kites, no?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Charles Courier.
And then, how does he handle the exposure?
He's got a remote control. He can see what the camera is seeing.
So I wanted to ask two things. One, how important it is to have a DSLR?
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to, you know, for good questions you get this book. So that's a good question. Yeah.
So how important is it in this world, you know, to have a DSLR and then shoot something, and you know, the whole concept of photo manipulation? Because when I went to a gallery and when I wanted to show my work, I saw 15 pictures which were manipulated. You know, something trippy, something offbeat, something different. You know, faces, 100 faces in one picture, and then I had normal pictures. So nobody really regarded.
Manipulation in photography has been going on since photography even began. Okay. You must have heard of Lewis Carroll, right? Lewis Carroll was also a photographer. One of the first instances of trying to fool people was Lewis Carroll at the age of 7 or 8, when she actually went and made cutouts of fairies, got a picture shot, the fairies and her in the same frame. People believed it. You know, so photo manipulation has been around for a very long time. There's nothing wrong with it. Of course, there is also something like ethics involved in photo manipulation. So certain kinds of photography does not allow it. Photojournalism does not allow it. Even cropping the frame in the wrong way is not allowed in photojournalism. Okay, because it can change the meaning of the story that is shot. Certain areas, yes, there are limitations when it comes to how much you can manipulate, but there's nothing wrong in it. If you want to create art by shooting and then processing it inside a computer, do it. Nothing wrong with it. Every photographer today, you know, digital photographers, the least that they do is correct the color, or change the tones, or increase or decrease the contrast, or do something. So as far as any kind of photography goes, that is perfectly fine. That is still okay. Okay. So in international competitions, sometimes you're not allowed to add or delete elements. So that amount of manipulation is not okay.
Any other questions? Anybody else? Yeah.
Good. Pila.
How important is photo editing when you need a good picture?
By photo editing, do you mean selections of pictures, or are you talking about in the computer?
In the computer.
I think it's very important today. It is important today. You need to get the best out of what a camera has gotten. That's why you shoot RAW. The RAW file in your camera, you don't shoot JPEGs, right? I mean, we shoot JPEGs. I prefer shooting JPEGs because I don't want to spend the time looking at it in the computer, so I shoot JPEGs. But at the same time, a lot of photographers, especially professionals, they shoot in RAW. Because later on you can correct, you can increase the exposure. There are some shadow areas which needs to be opened up. You can open it up, highlights can be recovered. So all that is okay. It's essential, in fact.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are the things that you should keep in mind while doing landscape photography?
Landscape photography. Oh, okay. I think especially when you're shooting landscapes, okay, people somehow they forget the meaning of what landscape really means. Most people when you see a landscape, it's the scene in front of you. Okay, but a landscape can be above. It can be the clouds. You don't need to include so much of the foreground. It can be just the clouds with a hint of a foreground. It can just be the horizon. It can be just the ground. Okay, a landscape can be a macro shot. Okay, you can find a landscape inside a patch of moss. There's a lot to a landscape. Okay, it can be a cityscape, it can be a seascape, it can be so many things. So the first thing about landscape photography is, to be able to recognize the kind of subjects that are shooting, to be able to see the landscape, to be able to see it. The second thing is light. Second most important thing is light. You got to watch the light. Landscape is all about waiting. It is all about waiting for the right moment to shoot, because you might get a good shot at 11 a.m. in the morning because the sun is behind you and the landscape is well lit, but could it have been really great at 5 o'clock in the morning, at twilight? What would have been, what happens if I had left the shutter on for 2 hours by putting a neutral density filter on it? So landscape is all about, there's a lot of technique to it. And it's all about waiting. There's a lot of waiting. Patience. Patience is very, very important for landscape photographers. Anything else? Alright guys, thank you. You've been a great audience.